It began with a package that should never have arrived. There was no return address, no postage stamp, no delivery record. It was simply waiting outside the apartment door of retired investigator Daniel Cross. For 32 years, Daniel had worked some of the country's most difficult criminal investigations. He had seen murders, disappearances, fraud, kidnappings, cases that haunted entire communities. But he had never seen anything like this. Inside the package was a single black folder. There was no label, only a faded government seal pressed into the cover. The seal belonged to an agency that no longer existed. Daniel frowned. He carefully opened the folder. The first page carried only 6 words. The case that should never have been solved. No case number, no signatures, no department name, only a date. October 14th, 1986. Daniel searched his memory. Nothing. He had worked during those years. He remembered almost every major investigation. This one meant nothing. He turned the page. A crime scene photograph appeared. An empty warehouse. Broken windows. Dust covering the floor. Nothing unusual. Until he looked closer. There were evidence markers placed across the room. Marker 1. Marker 2. Marker 3. But there were no objects beside them. It looked as though someone had photographed evidence that no longer existed. The next page listed every recovered item. A recorder, a notebook, 3 fingerprints, 1 cassette tape, a metal key. Every single item had the same handwritten note beside it. Removed. No explanation followed. Daniel leaned back. Someone had erased every piece of evidence. The following pages contained interviews, witness statements, officer reports, laboratory results. Everything appeared authentic. Every signature matched real investigators from that time. People Daniel personally knew. Some had already passed away. Others had retired years earlier. He reached the final page. It was blank, except for one sentence typed across the center. If you are reading this, they failed. Daniel immediately contacted the National Archives. He requested every official record connected to the date. Nothing appeared. He searched old newspaper collections. Nothing. Television reports. Nothing. Court records. Nothing. It was as though the entire investigation had been removed from history. Not hidden, erased. Hours later, he visited a former colleague. Martin had spent decades maintaining archived police records. If anyone remembered the investigation, it would be him. Daniel placed the folder on the table. Martin opened it. His expression changed instantly. He closed the folder without reading another page. "Where did you get this?" Daniel asked if he recognized it. Martin refused to answer. Instead, he stood, locked every window, closed the office blinds, then lowered his voice. "I thought every copy had been destroyed." Daniel stared at him. Destroyed by whom? Martin remained silent. Several seconds passed. Finally, he spoke again. "Stop looking. Some cases are buried for a reason." Daniel asked who ordered the files removed. Martin shook his head. "You don't understand. Nobody ordered it. People simply stopped talking about it. They acted as if it had never happened. One by one. Every investigator. Every witness. Every official." Daniel asked the question that had begun to haunt him. What happened inside that warehouse? Martin looked toward the door. His hands were trembling. Then he whispered something Daniel would never forget. "You're asking the wrong question. The real question is, why was anyone willing to erase an entire investigation, just to make sure nobody ever found the answer?" Daniel looked back at the black folder. For the first time in years, he realized he had just reopened a case that someone had spent decades making disappear. Daniel barely slept that night. The black folder remained open on his desk. Every page raised more questions than answers. By sunrise, he had made a decision. He would visit the warehouse. The address still existed. It sat on the edge of an abandoned industrial district. Factories surrounded it. Most had been empty for decades. The warehouse looked untouched. Rust covered the steel doors. The windows were broken. Nature had begun reclaiming the building. Daniel stepped inside. Dust filled the air. Sunlight slipped through holes in the roof. The room matched the old photograph almost perfectly. Even the cracks in the concrete floor were the same. But something was wrong. According to the file, dozens of investigators had searched this building. Yet there was almost no sign that anyone had ever been there. No old evidence markings. No damaged flooring. No forgotten equipment. Nothing. It was as if time had erased every trace. Daniel unfolded the crime scene photograph. He walked slowly across the room, using the broken windows as reference points. He found the exact position where evidence marker 1 had once stood. The floor looked ordinary, until he noticed a faint circular stain beneath the dust. Someone had tried to scrub it away. He knelt beside it. The stain was too large to be oil, too dark to be rust. A laboratory report in the file described it only as an unidentified biological substance. No match had ever been found. He moved toward marker 2. The report claimed investigators had recovered an old cassette recorder there, but no recorder had been listed in any property archive. It had vanished. Marker 3 had once contained a small brass key. The key had also disappeared. Daniel searched the room for hours. Nothing. Just before leaving, he noticed something hidden behind a collapsed storage shelf. A small metal plate had been bolted to the wall. Most of it was covered by decades of dirt. He wiped it clean. Only 4 numbers appeared. 1014, October 14, the same date printed on the first page of the file. As Daniel photographed the plate, footsteps echoed outside. Someone else had entered the building. He switched off his flashlight. Silence. The footsteps stopped, then began again. Slow, deliberate. They were getting closer. Daniel waited behind a concrete pillar. The footsteps reached the center of the warehouse, then stopped completely. He listened. Nothing. After several seconds, he stepped out. The building was empty. No doors had opened. No windows had moved. No sound remained. Only fresh footprints in the dust. One single trail. They entered the warehouse. They never left. Daniel followed the prints. They ended in the middle of the room. No return tracks, no hidden hatch, no broken floor, nothing. The trail simply stopped. His phone vibrated. An unknown number. He answered. No one spoke. Only the sound of slow breathing. Then a calm voice whispered 4 words. You found the beginning. The line went dead. Daniel tried calling back. The number did not exist. He returned home and reopened the file. This time he noticed something he had missed. Every witness described hearing the same sound inside the warehouse, moments before the crime was discovered. Not a scream, not a gunshot, a clock striking midnight. The problem was obvious. The nearest clock tower had been demolished 5 years before the incident. There was no clock, no bells, nothing capable of making that sound. Yet every witness described it the same way. Exactly 12 chimes, not one more, not one less. Daniel looked at the date again. October 14th, 1986. He suddenly realized something that made his blood run cold. The official weather records for that night showed heavy rain. But every crime scene photograph showed perfectly dry ground. Either the records were wrong, or the photographs were taken at a completely different time. Someone was lying. The only question left was who. Daniel spent the next morning comparing every document in the black folder. The contradictions kept growing. The witness statements claimed the warehouse was surrounded by police within minutes. The official radio logs showed no emergency calls. The laboratory reports listed dozens of collected items. The evidence inventory listed none. Nothing matched. There was only one place left to look. The Central Evidence Archive. Most physical evidence from closed investigations had been moved there years ago. If even one item from the case had survived, it would be inside. Daniel showed his retired investigator credentials. The archivist recognized his name. You can look through the records, she said, but don't expect much. Boxes stretched across endless rows of steel shelves. Each one carried faded labels. Dates, case numbers, departments, everything was organized. Everything except the year 1986. One section was missing. Not empty, removed. The shelving itself had been dismantled. Fresh bolts held newer shelves in place. Daniel asked what had happened. The archivist checked the maintenance records. Nothing. No renovation, no relocation, no explanation. It was as though that section had never existed. Then she remembered something. There was one box. It arrived without a case number. No one ever claimed it. She disappeared into the storage room. Several minutes later, she returned, carrying a small gray evidence box. Dust covered the lid. The seal had never been broken. Daniel carefully opened it. Inside was a single cassette tape. Nothing else. No report. No label. No initials. Only a handwritten date. October 14th, 1986. His pulse quickened. The archive still had an old cassette player. He inserted the tape, pressed play, static. Nearly 2 minutes of silence. Then footsteps. Someone was walking slowly across concrete. A voice began speaking. Not frightened, not rushed. Calm. The evidence is still here. A pause. They're watching. More footsteps. Another pause. Then a second voice. Far away. Almost impossible to hear. You don't have much time. Suddenly, the recording stopped. Not faded, not damaged. Stopped. The rest of the tape was blank. Daniel rewound it. The same thing happened. Exactly 2 minutes and 18 seconds. No more. No less. The archivist looked uneasy. I've never heard that before. Daniel removed the tape. Something caught his attention. The plastic casing had been opened before. A tiny scratch ran across one screw. Someone had taken the tape apart. He examined it under a magnifying lamp. Hidden beneath the transparent reel was a folded strip of paper, barely visible. He carefully opened the cassette. Inside was the note. 3 words. They erased us. Nothing else. No signature. No date. No explanation. Daniel photographed the note. When he looked up, the archivist had gone pale. She was staring past him, toward the archive entrance. 2 men in dark suits had entered the building. Neither wore identification, neither spoke. They simply watched. One of them pointed toward the cassette in Daniel's hand. The other quietly turned and walked away. Seconds later, the building's fire alarm erupted. Sprinklers activated. Water poured from the ceiling. Staff rushed toward the exits. Boxes toppled from shelves. The lights went out. In the chaos, Daniel held onto the cassette and the hidden note. When the emergency lights finally came on, the 2 men were gone. So was the gray evidence box. Only the tape remained in Daniel's pocket. Someone hadn't come to steal the recording. They had come to make sure nothing else survived. Daniel left the archive with only one surviving piece of evidence, the cassette. Everything else had disappeared. Again. He spread the witness statements across his desk. There had originally been 9 witnesses. Now only 4 were still alive. The first refused every request for an interview. The second had moved overseas years earlier. The third agreed to meet. Her name was Eleanor Hayes. She lived alone in a quiet village more than 3 hours away. When Daniel arrived, she already seemed to know why he was there. You found the file, she said. Daniel never told her about it. He asked how she knew. She ignored the question. Instead, she stared at the cassette resting on the table. I hoped that thing was destroyed. Daniel asked her what happened inside the warehouse. Eleanor remained silent for a long time. Then she finally spoke. I never went inside. Daniel opened her original witness statement. It clearly said she had entered the building with the first officers. She looked at the document. Her face turned white. I never signed this. The signature belonged to her. Every letter matched. Yet she insisted it was a forgery. Daniel showed her another page. She stopped breathing for a moment. There was a sketch of the warehouse. A route marked in red. At the end of the path, someone had written 2 words. Don't follow. Eleanor slowly pushed the paper away. I've never seen that drawing. She stood and walked to an old wooden cabinet. Inside was a small box filled with newspaper clippings. None mentioned the warehouse. Instead, every article described strange disappearances across different parts of the country. Different years, different victims. One thing connected them all. October 14. Every disappearance had happened on the same date. Decades apart, Daniel counted the articles. 9 in total. 1 for every witness listed in the original case file. But there were no disappearances in your investigation, Daniel said. Eleanor looked directly at him. That's because you're reading the second version. Daniel froze. The second version? She nodded. There was another investigation before yours. Daniel searched the folder. No reference, no earlier file. Nothing. It was erased first, Eleanor whispered. Before Daniel could ask another question, someone knocked on the front door. 3 slow knocks. No more. No less. Eleanor immediately turned off every light in the house. She whispered, Don't answer. The knocking came again. 3 more times. Silence followed. Daniel carefully looked through the curtain. No one stood outside. The road was empty. The garden was still. Then his phone vibrated. A text message from an unknown number. Stop interviewing the witnesses. He rushed outside. No cars. No footsteps. No movement. Only a fresh envelope lying on the front step. His name was written across the front. Inside was a single photograph. It showed Daniel standing outside the archive the day before. The picture had been taken from behind him. At the bottom, someone had written one sentence. You're becoming part of the file. Daniel looked back toward the house. Eleanor was gone. The front door stood open. Her chair was empty. The tea on the table was still warm. She had vanished in less than 30 seconds. Without a sound, without a trace, and without leaving a single footprint behind. Daniel searched every room. Eleanor was nowhere inside the house. He called her name again and again. No answer. The back door was still locked from the inside. Every window was closed. Nothing appeared disturbed. It was as if she had simply ceased to exist. The local police arrived within 20 minutes. They searched the property. No fingerprints except Daniel's and Eleanor's. No tire tracks. No footprints. No signs of forced entry. One officer quietly admitted something unusual. "This isn't the first time." Daniel asked what he meant. The officer hesitated. Then he opened an old incident report. 5 years earlier, another resident had vanished from the same house. Locked doors. No witnesses. No evidence. The investigation ended after 3 weeks. Unsolved. Daniel requested a copy of the report. The officer handed it over. Half the pages were missing. Someone had removed them long before. Only the final page remained. Across the bottom was a handwritten note. Transferred by special order. No department name, no signature, no explanation. Daniel drove directly to the National Records Office. If special orders existed, they had to be documented. A retired administrator agreed to help. Hours passed as they searched old storage indexes. Finally, one cabinet appeared. Every drawer was labeled, except one. Its metal tag had been torn away. Inside were hundreds of authorization forms. Everyone carried the same stamp, Special Order 17. Daniel opened the first file. A homicide investigation. Closed. The second. A disappearance. Closed. The third. A financial crime. Closed. Different crimes, different years, different investigators. Yet every file had been terminated under the exact same order. Then Daniel noticed something even stranger. Every investigation had reached one specific point before being shut down. Each had uncovered evidence connected to October 14th. Nothing beyond that date remained. Someone wasn't covering up one crime, they were protecting a pattern. The administrator leaned closer. "I've seen that order before." Daniel asked who issued it. The old man slowly shook his head. "That's the problem. It wasn't issued." Daniel frowned. "What do you mean? There is no department called Special Order 17. No law created it. No office signed it. It doesn't officially exist." Daniel felt a chill. Thousands of investigations had been ended by an authority that had never existed. As he photographed the documents, the lights flickered. The administrator looked toward the hallway. Footsteps, slow, steady, exactly the same pace Daniel had heard inside the warehouse. The footsteps stopped outside the archive room. Neither man spoke. The door handle slowly turned. The door opened. No one was there. Only a fresh document lying on the floor. It had not been there seconds earlier. Daniel picked it up. The paper was yellow with age. Across the top were 3 typed words. First, investigation report. His heart raced. There had been another investigation, just as Eleanor had claimed. Below the title was a list of detectives. Every name had been crossed out in black ink. Every page after the first had been carefully removed. Only one sentence remained. They solved it once. That was the mistake. Daniel looked up. The administrator had disappeared. His chair was still moving. His glasses rested on the desk. The room was silent. Once again, someone had vanished without leaving a single trace. Daniel searched the records office from top to bottom. The administrator was gone. Security cameras showed him entering the archive. They never showed him leaving. The officers reviewing the footage could not explain it. One moment he was there. The next, he simply wasn't. Daniel took the only remaining page from the first investigation report and returned home. He pinned every document to a large board. Crime scene photographs. Witness statements. Special Order 17. The cassette recording. The hidden note. The mysterious disappearances. For hours he searched for a connection. Then he noticed something everyone else had missed. Every investigation had ended exactly 13 days after it began. Not 12, not 14, always 13. He marked every date on a calendar. Another pattern appeared. Every case began on October 14th. Every investigation ended on October 27th. The dates never changed. No matter the year, no matter the location, no matter the victims. It was impossible. Daniel returned to the cassette. This time he slowed the recording. Beneath the static, there was another sound. Very faint, almost hidden, a series of numbers. He cleaned the audio as much as he could. The numbers became clearer. 21, 7, 34, 9, 15. At first they meant nothing. Then Daniel compared them to old city survey maps. They matched storage unit numbers inside the abandoned warehouse. One unit had never been searched. Storage unit 21. The next morning he returned. The building was exactly as he had left it. He forced open the rusted door to unit 21. Inside was almost nothing. Dust. Broken shelves. A collapsed wooden crate. Then he noticed a loose concrete block in the corner. Beneath it lay a small leather journal. The cover carried no name, only a date, October 14, 1958, nearly 30 years before the warehouse investigation. The pages belonged to a detective named Samuel Mercer. His first entry was short. "We solved the impossible case." The next entry was stranger. "The evidence returned after we destroyed it." Daniel continued reading. Mercer described fingerprints appearing on clean surfaces, photographs changing overnight, witnesses remembering different events each time they were questioned. Then came the final complete entry. "We identified who was responsible." The next page had been ripped out. Every remaining page was missing. Only the inside back cover remained. Someone had written a warning in dark ink. If another investigation reaches the truth, it begins again. As Daniel closed the journal, he heard a familiar sound, a clock striking midnight. 1, 2, 3, he counted every chime. 12. The warehouse had no electricity, no clock, no bell tower nearby. Yet the sound echoed through the empty building. When the final chime faded, Daniel noticed something impossible. Fresh evidence markers stood across the floor. Marker 1, Marker 2, Marker 3, exactly where they had appeared in the original crime scene photographs. They had not been there a moment earlier. Slowly, a fourth marker appeared near the entrance. It carried a handwritten label. Marker 4. Daniel walked toward it. There was nothing beneath it, only a sealed envelope. His name was written across the front. Inside was a single sentence. "Now the investigation belongs to you." Daniel carried the envelope out of the warehouse. He did not open it again until he reached home. Inside, beneath the single sentence, was a small memory card taped to the paper. It looked new. Impossible. The original case had happened decades earlier. Memory cards did not exist then. Daniel inserted it into his computer. There was only one file. No title, no date. He pressed play. The screen remained black. "Only audio," a man spoke in a calm voice. "If you're hearing this, you solved enough of the case to find what we missed." Daniel froze. The voice sounded familiar. He searched through old interviews in the file. It belonged to Detective Samuel Mercer, the detective who had written the journal in 1958. That was impossible. Samuel Mercer had died in 1961. Digital recordings did not exist, yet the file had clearly been created on modern equipment. Mercer's voice continued. "We believed the evidence was the mystery. It wasn't. The investigation itself was." Daniel listened without moving. Every time someone uncovers the truth, the case changes. It removes witnesses. It rewrites reports. It destroys evidence. And when that isn't enough, it chooses a new investigator. Daniel felt the room grow cold. Mercer continued. "I thought I was the first. I was wrong. There were others before me. They all disappeared." The recording crackled. For several seconds, only static remained. Then another voice interrupted. It was older, weak, almost whispering. "Do not finish the investigation." The file cut back to Mercer. "If you're hearing that warning, it's already too late." The audio ended. A second file suddenly appeared on the memory card. Daniel had not seen it before. He opened it. A scanned photograph filled the screen. It showed the original investigative team standing outside the warehouse. 8 detectives, 1 forensic specialist, 1 witness. Daniel examined each face. Then his heart stopped. Standing at the far end of the group was Daniel himself. Not someone who looked similar. Him. The same face. The same scar above his left eyebrow. The photograph was dated 1958, more than 30 years before he was born. He checked for manipulation. Nothing. The image was genuine. His phone rang. Unknown number. He answered. The same calm voice from the warehouse spoke. "You've seen the photograph." Daniel demanded to know who was calling. The caller ignored the question. Instead, he said something that made Daniel's hands shake. "Look behind you." Daniel turned immediately. The room was empty. He faced the window. His reflection stared back. Then, for less than a second reflection appeared beside him. An older man, wearing the same coat as Detective Samuel Mercer. When Daniel spun around again, no one was there. The phone line had already gone dead. He looked back at the computer. The photograph had disappeared. The memory card was completely blank. No files, no folders, nothing. It was as though the recording had never existed, except for one thing. On Daniel's desk, resting beside the empty memory card, was a new evidence marker, number 5. Daniel placed evidence marker 5 beside the others he had collected. He no longer questioned how they appeared. He only wanted to know why. The answer had to be hidden in the investigations that came before his. He returned to the warehouse one final time. This time he brought every surviving piece of evidence: the black folder, the cassette tape, Samuel Mercer's journal, the blank memory card, the hidden note, and evidence marker 5. As midnight approached, the warehouse became unnaturally quiet. Not a single sound came from outside. No wind, no insects, no distant traffic. At exactly 12 o'clock, the first chime echoed through the building, then the second. By the 12th chime, every evidence marker had moved. They now formed a perfect circle in the center of the warehouse. The concrete floor began to vibrate. A section slowly slid aside. Beneath it was a narrow staircase. Daniel switched on his flashlight and descended. The stairs led to an underground room. It was far older than the warehouse above. Stone walls surrounded shelves filled with boxes. Hundreds of them. Every box carried the same title: The Case That Should Never Have Been Solved. Each box ended with a different year: 1912, 1913, 1914, 1915, 1916. Dozens more followed. The investigation had never been a single case. It had repeated for more than a century. Daniel opened the oldest box. Inside was a notebook from 1912. Its final page contained one sentence: "We solved it. Nothing changed." The next box contained photographs. The next held audio reels. The next contained witness statements. Every investigation reached the same conclusion. Every investigation was erased. Not because the truth was false, because the truth was dangerous. At the back of the room stood a steel cabinet. Unlike the others, it was locked. The brass key from the original evidence list fit perfectly. Daniel had never found that key, yet somehow it was already in his pocket. The lock clicked open. Inside rested a single document. Its title read, "Purpose of Special Order 17. Daniel unfolded the pages. They explained everything. Special Order 17 had never been created to hide a murderer. It existed to hide the investigation itself. Every detective who reached the truth uncovered the same impossible discovery. The case behaved like a living thing. It protected itself. It rewrote memories. It erased records. It removed evidence. Sometimes, it removed people. Destroying the files never ended it. It only delayed the next investigation. The final paragraph carried a warning. If you are reading this, the cycle has already begun again. There is only one way to stop it. Daniel turned the page. It was blank. Someone had removed the final instruction. A cold voice echoed through the underground room. "You finally understand." Daniel raised his flashlight. An elderly man stood in the darkness. His face matched the photographs from 1958. Detective Samuel Mercer. He looked exactly as he had decades earlier. Not older, not younger, exactly the same. Samuel spoke quietly. "I tried to end it. I only became part of it." Then he stepped backward into the darkness. The lights went out. When Daniel switched on the flashlight again, the underground room was empty. Every box had disappeared. The staircase behind him no longer existed. Only one document remained on the floor. Across the top, in fresh black ink, were 6 chilling words. Final Investigator, Daniel Cross. Daniel stared at the document. Final Investigator. His name had replaced every other. The paper was still warm, as though it had only just been printed. He folded it carefully and slipped it inside the black folder. When he looked up, he was no longer underground. He was standing in the middle of the warehouse. The hidden staircase was gone. The concrete floor was solid again. For a moment, Daniel wondered if he had imagined everything. Then he noticed something impossible. The warehouse was no longer abandoned. The broken windows were intact. The lights overhead were glowing. Police vehicles filled the parking lot outside. Voices echoed through the building. Officers hurried past him without saying a word. They acted as if Daniel belonged there. He looked at a nearby calendar hanging on the office wall. October 14th, 1986. His heart began to race. He had somehow stepped into the night the original investigation began. An officer walked toward him. Without hesitation, he handed Daniel a clipboard. "We found another witness." Daniel took the clipboard automatically. The witness's name made him stop breathing. Daniel Cross, age 12. Daniel dropped the clipboard. He remembered. When he was a child, his parents had driven past an old warehouse after midnight. There had been flashing police lights, crowds, ambulances. His father had told him never to ask about what happened there. Daniel had forgotten the memory. Or perhaps it had been taken from him. He ran outside. Across the road stood a young boy holding his father's hand. It was him, exactly as he remembered. The child looked directly at the older Daniel. For one brief second, their eyes met. The boy smiled. Then, he quietly pointed toward the warehouse. As if he already knew what would happen. The world around Daniel began to shake. The officers froze where they stood. Rain started falling. The same heavy rain recorded in the official weather reports. Yet the ground beneath Daniel's feet remained perfectly dry. The contradiction finally made sense. The photographs had not been wrong. The weather records had not been wrong. Both had been true. The warehouse existed in two moments at once. One where it rained, one where it did not. Every investigation crossed between them without realizing it. That was why witness memories never matched. That was why evidence appeared and disappeared. The case was not hiding a killer, it was hiding a fracture in time. Anyone who investigated it became trapped between two histories. Samuel Mercer had never survived 1958. He had never truly died either. Eleanor had not vanished. She had crossed into the other timeline. Every missing investigator, every missing witness, every erased file, they had all been pulled across the same invisible boundary. Daniel opened the black folder one last time. A final page had appeared. He had never seen it before. Only one question was written across the center. "Will you close the case, or let someone else inherit it?" Daniel picked up his pen. His hand trembled. He realized that whatever he wrote next would decide whether the cycle ended or began again. Reply next for the final part. Daniel stared at the blank space beneath the question. His pen never touched the paper. Every investigation before his had ended the same way. Someone reached the truth. Someone tried to stop it, and then the case erased itself. Daniel closed the folder. For the first time since the package had arrived, he stopped searching for answers. Instead, he searched for the pattern. Every investigator had tried to solve the mystery. None had tried to break it. He returned to the warehouse before midnight. The building was silent. Evidence markers 1 through 5 still formed a perfect circle. The clock began striking 12. 1, 2, 3. By the 12th chime, the air inside the warehouse seemed to freeze. The floor trembled. The hidden staircase started to appear again. Daniel didn't move. That was different. Every investigator before him had gone down the stairs. He remained exactly where he was. The staircase finished opening. Nothing happened. Minutes passed. The silence became unbearable. Then the staircase slowly closed again. The evidence markers faded into the concrete. The impossible tension that had filled the warehouse suddenly disappeared. Daniel looked at the black folder. Its pages were changing. Photographs faded, witness statements vanished, Special Order 17 disappeared. The title page became blank. One by one, every piece of evidence dissolved until only a single sheet remained. Across the center were 6 simple words. The investigation has been abandoned. Daniel smiled for the first time. The case had survived because every investigator followed the same path. It expected curiosity. It depended on obsession. The only way to defeat it was to refuse its final invitation. Weeks passed. Nothing unusual happened. No anonymous phone calls. No disappearing witnesses. No new evidence. The warehouse was demolished the following month. The land was cleared. Life slowly returned to normal. Daniel locked the empty black folder inside a safe. He never opened it again. Years later, shortly before retiring completely, he received one final package. No return address. No postage. No delivery record. Inside was a newspaper. The headline read, "Historic Warehouse Demolished Without Incident." Daniel smiled. Then a small photograph slipped from between the pages. It showed a modern crime scene. Bright yellow evidence markers surrounded an abandoned subway platform. Standing in the background was a young detective Daniel had never met. On the back of the photograph were 4 handwritten words. Case reopened. new investigator. Daniel looked toward the empty black folder resting inside the safe. The lock was still sealed. It had never been opened. Slowly, a single new page slid out from beneath the cover. Fresh ink appeared by itself. It listed the name of the young detective from the photograph. Below it, another line formed. Previous investigator, Daniel Cross. The page stopped writing. For a moment, the room was silent. Then, somewhere in the distance, a clock struck midnight, exactly 12 times. Perhaps the mystery had never been about solving the case. Perhaps every answer was only another beginning, and somewhere, another investigator had already opened a file that should never have existed.